Do you want to be right and support your own ideas and your own expectations? Or do you want to be happy? So 2 Corinthians 10:4-6 talks about this. It says, "For the weapons of our warfare," that means us, "are not carnal." And carnal to me basically means whatever your intellectual mind is thinking about, it's not right. Even though in this world that we live in, intellectual prowess and being smart is respected. But the weapons of our warfare are mighty in God for pulling down strongholds. So then you have to ask yourself, what is a stronghold? Well, I see a stronghold as a pyramid, or in a flat dimension, it's a triangle. So there is what I'm going to call the spirit of wanting to be right. There's a paradigm shift. So let's say there's a paradigm shift in how you see this, and you put on your new glasses, and the glasses is the spirit of wanting to be right. So everything in your world lines up with the glasses that you're wearing, that you want to be right. So you bind with a stronghold. Okay, here they are. The spirit of sabotage. You bind with the spirit of singleness. You bind with the spirit of aloneness. You bind with the spirit of being an orphan and without, spiritual protection, which as a child I grew up with, and I'm very familiar with that. The spirit of being ostracized. I remember I had nightmares about people not having heads, walking around, and I still remember that dream. And I felt like I was all alone. Everyone else was around me that didn't have heads, but I was the only one with my head. Okay, so you have the spirit of, I call it the shield of rejection. Because your house that you're holding on to, you want to be right that you're not lovable. You want to be right that you're not worthy of perfect love. You want to be right that you're being a house of ostracized. So you can be a hermit, alone. The house of not having a tribe, or a community, or a family, or a church, or a fellowship. You're all alone because you're terminally unique and no one understands you. And you get to be right. You get to be right because you've got your glasses now in the spirit of being right, so that anybody that interacts with your sphere of influence, your house cannot be divided. So continuing on with 2 Corinthians 10:4-6. So we cast down arguments. We cast down arguments. So here's a good example. The argument is, I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not worthy of perfect love. And I'm not worthy of that kind of a human being. That they do exist, but they're rare because of the world that we live in. So every high thing, and that's what this thing is. This thing is the spirit of, I'm not worthy of love, against the knowledge of God. Well, if you are in a relationship with God and God loves you and you love God, then that very thing is against the knowledge of God. So we bring every thought into captivity. So I'm going to call this, again, a pyramid, a house of the captivity of God. So imagine to the other part of Corinthians, to the obedience of Christ, and be ready to punish all disobedience with your obedience, when your obedience is fulfilled. So when this thought of being unlovable comes into your brain, you have to take that thought like it's an entity and put it into the house of captivity of God. You put it under to the obedience, and you force it to the obedience of Christ and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. So again, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So the spirit of rejection will assassinate its target. So let's say somebody really does love you and tells you that they love you. The spirit of rejection, which is a house that is not going to be divided. Remember, the house that you have is you want to be right. You want to be right because you're unlovable. So the spirit of rejection comes in and it assassinates the target, which in this case is myself. So you have a house of not being lovable. and the house divided against itself will not stand. You have a house of being ostracized from your community, from your church, from your family, from your spouses, from anybody in your life. And every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. So if someone tells you that they love you, and it is a truly mighty in God for the pulling down of strongholds, because I have a house of I am not lovable or worthy of love. Yep, this is low, what they call low self-esteem. This is the house of low self-esteem. And the thing is, when you are in alignment with God, you are lovable. God actually loves you. But this fallen angels, this is how they feel. They feel unlovable and unworthy. I mean, that's why they're arrogant and prideful. And if you get with one of them, they do everything to kill, steal, and destroy. Okay, here's an example of a house. It's an upside down pyramid. This is the satanic version of this. Number 1, house of not being lovable. Number 2, house of not being worthy of perfect and true love. Number 3, house of being ostracized. Number 4, house of no tribe, no family, no fellowship, and no church, and no bride of God. A house divided against itself will not stand. Inside of the house, we have house of every high thing which exalts itself against the knowledge of God. So when we think that we're not lovable, that's something that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. And the little green stuff are people. There's a human soul. That's you. It represents you and me at the bottom of the pyramid. And we're a part of this house, of this triangle, of this house. As long as we believe that we want to be right and that we're unlovable, anything that comes into our reality that is in fact opposite of that house of thought, we will bring up what I called the shield of rejection, is God's protection. We reject what perfect love is before we get hurt. Here's an example if you have this. If you are in a relationship with a narcissist, they hate you because they are in allegiance with the kingdom of darkness, and they hate God and they hate God's people, and they really hate themselves too. But as they are in allegiance with the kingdom of darkness and you want them, why do you want them? Because a house divided against itself will not stand. As long as they hate you, then you want to love them. And therefore, your house of rejection will not be divided. Your house of ostracized will not be divided. Your house of not being worthy of perfect and true love will not be divided. Your house of being ostracized from the world will not be divided. Your house of having no tribe, no family, no fellowship, and no church will not be divided. Because you go after the things you can't have. Because a house divided against itself will not stand. So if you have this house of being unworthy of love and someone comes into your life and really does love you, that shield of rejection protects your house of unworthiness and your house of love. And this is an example of what not perfect love is. And this is of every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of Christ. These are the thoughts that we have about ourselves, that we want to be right rather than being happy.